Tonight, the major storm threat this holiday weekend. Heavy snow already falling across the Midwest. An entire river frozen over in Iowa. States of emergency in effect in North Carolina and Virginia. The system stretching from the south to the northeast, expected to bring ice, high winds, and up to a foot of snow. Some areas bracing for wind chills 40 below zero. We have the timing and the track tonight. Also, data from several major U.S. cities suggests the Omicron wave may be ending. Cases in New York City dropping for 3 straight days. President Biden announcing Americans can order free at-home tests starting next week. But insurance will begin covering the cost this weekend. And what about those pop-up testing sites? While you may be getting scammed before you get swabbed. Inside the fire, the dramatic body cam footage as sheriff's deputies race to evacuate residents from a raging Colorado wildfire. The officers going door to door as the flames spread, even rushing to clear out an entire Costco. Prepping for war, the U.S. says there's mounting evidence Russia could invade Ukraine in the next 30 days. The cyber attack crippling Ukraine's government websites with a message reading, "Be afraid and wait for the worst." Andrea Mitchell joins Top Story with how the U.S. is responding. Plus, the disturbing body cam footage showing a police sergeant choking a fellow officer after she allegedly tried to de-escalate an encounter with a suspect. And deadly backhoe rampage. The suspect using construction equipment to damage homes, cars, and even an ambulance before he was killed by police. Top Story starts right now. Good evening, I'm Tom Llamas. We begin Top Story tonight with the major storm system stretching from the south to the northeast this holiday weekend. More than 60 million Americans under weather alerts at this hour. That system on the move after bringing heavy snow and gusty winds to the upper Midwest. New drone footage showing the entire Cedar River in Iowa. Take a look at that, frozen over as temperatures plunge. Preparations in Arkansas tonight as the South braces for a potential ice storm. Virginia, one of 2 states declaring a state of emergency, hoping to avoid another mess on I-95 after drivers were trapped for over 24 hours last week. The storm expected to bring up to 3 inches of snow to cities like D.C., Philly, New York, and Boston. Anyone traveling over this 3-day weekend should plan extra time and prepare for potential delays. Let's get right to Dasha Burns, who leads us off tonight from right here in New York City.
Tonight, the monster winter storm already hitting North Dakota. Drivers battling near whiteout conditions. In Minnesota, cars skidding off icy roads. The Cedar River now frozen over. 64 million Americans now under winter weather alerts across 26 states. The storm set to get even more intense, with up to 10 inches of snow across the plains and sections of the Midwest. In New England, wind chills could plummet to a frigid -40. In North Carolina, crews prepping to handle ice buildup on power lines, with fears of worker shortages because of COVID.
We're doing everything we can humanly possible based on our limited resources of trucks.
And after last week's nightmare in Virginia on I-95, trapping drivers for more than 24 hours, the governor today declaring a state of emergency. Crews pre-treating the interstate for ice.
All right, Dasha Burns joins us now live tonight from New York City. All right, Dasha, with all the severe weather, are there any air travel delays so far?
Yeah, Tom, there are already alerts at major airports across the Midwest and Northeast, so folks should expect travel delays, especially as airlines deal with worker shortages due to COVID. On top of these storms, some airlines are already waiving change fees this weekend. And Tom, you remember that disaster on the I-95 last week. If you're going to be on the roads this weekend, which if you can avoid it, avoid it. But if you're going to be on the roads, you should make sure you're prepared. Have some of those basics in your car, blankets, flashlights, make sure you have a cell phone charger and some food, non-perishable food, any medications for your family. And as we remember with our Josh Letterman, who had his dog, his pup in the car with him last week, and maybe even some pet food if you're traveling with a pet, Tom.
All right, Dasha Burns for us. Dasha, all good reminders. We want to thank you for that. Let's get right to NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns, who's got the track of the storm tonight. Bill, what can you tell us?
Yeah, good evening, Tom. This will easily be our most widespread high-impact winter storm of the season. Already we showed you the pictures of the snow in the northern plains, and now the storm is on its way to the south, who doesn't deal as well with the snow and the ice. That's going to be the story this weekend. So you look at the radar, again, the pink is where we have a mix. Not a lot of that right now. The blue and the white is where the snow is. It is snowing hard in Des Moines and Ames. Iowa, by far the worst travel out there across the country, but that'll change. We were looking at the map here for all our winter weather alerts. About 64 million people are included in this. Notice one of the only states right in the middle that's not is Michigan and Indiana. We do have winter storm warnings and even ice storm warnings that have just been issued in areas of South Carolina and North Carolina. But as far as tonight goes, we're watching Iowa down through Missouri, even Kansas City and St. Louis going from rain over to snow. Then tomorrow, a little bit of a break in the storm. Whatever snow and ice is in areas of Arkansas and Oklahoma will be fairly light. But Saturday evening, as the storm pulls east and brings that cold air in, around a batch of quick, heavy snow around Nashville, possibly Memphis through Kentucky. Definitely North Georgia. We have to watch out for ice on Sunday. This is kind of the peak of the storm when the most significant damage and power outages will occur. And then watch out Monday morning. As this storm goes north, the winds really crank up on the coast. It's not snow I'm worried about or ice in New York City. Watch out for coastal flooding. This could be the highest water levels in lower portions of New York around the Battery since Hurricane Sandy. So, yeah, that gets your attention. This will not be Hurricane Sandy, but these will be extremely high water levels. We will get streets and possibly even some homes with water in them. And watch out for also very strong winds. As far as the snowfall goes, the highest totals in the Appalachians. That's where we could get that 6 to 12 inches from Asheville to Boone, the Roanoke northwards up through Pittsburgh, even Buffalo also. Notice I-95, you get a burst of snow, then over to rain. And Tom, if there's one thing I'm very concerned with that we could be talking about for days after this storm, it's the freezing rain and ice potential just north of Columbia up to just about Charlotte, North Carolina. We have the potential for a ½ inch of ice. And Tom, kind of the general rule is when you get a ½ inch of ice on trees, the limbs start breaking. If we get a ½ inch, that's when whole trees can start coming down. Very concerned about power outages lasting for days in the Carolinas.
All right, incredibly dangerous situation affecting so many states, too. All right, Bill, we thank you for your time. We want to turn to the other major headline tonight, the Omicron variant. Still ripping through most of the country, but promising signs now in parts of the country where the virus first surged. Data out of New York, Boston, and Philly suggesting they are turning the corner. Still, across the country, hospitals have been pushed to the brink because of staffing shortages. One now forced to bring in a mobile morgue to deal with the growing death toll. Here's NBC's Priscilla Thompson.
Tonight, the first signs that the Omicron surge may be waning in major cities in the Northeast.
Cases are slowing down. The rate of increase is slowing down.
New York's governor sounding cautiously optimistic this week as COVID infections in the city dropped for the first time since the Omicron wave began.
We are not at the end, but I wanted to say that this is, to me, a glimmer of hope in a time when we desperately need that.
Glimmers of hope across the region. In Boston, COVID levels in wastewater down nearly half from peak levels 2 weeks ago. And in Philadelphia, the positivity rate dropping for the first time in months from 45% positive in the last week of December to less than 20% most recently. Here in New York City's Times Square, this is what testing lines looked like less than a month ago. Now, those lines nearly non-existent. The city's positive case count, while still high, down dramatically.
These past few weeks, we have been noticing a huge decrease in the lines. We used to have lines that go all around Times Square, testing over 300 to 400 people a day in each location. And now we have 150 or 200 people tested daily.
If New York City is peaking, what do you think that means for the rest of the country?
I really think that this is hope.
But we're not there yet. From New Hampshire to Nevada, states are still battling the worst of it, shattering records. Nationwide, more than 800,000 cases per day. Roughly 20 states with less than 15% of available ICU beds. One hospital in Virginia now treating patients in a parking garage.
We're out of beds completely.
Alabama setting a record for child hospitalizations. 90% of kids ages 5 to 11 unvaccinated. Pediatric cases at this hospital have tripled in the last 3 days.
Sore throat, congestion, cough, difficulty breathing. flaring out of the nose while you're breathing.
The death toll still around 2,000 per day across the country. A hospital in Indiana now using a mobile morgue, bracing for unimaginable loss.
We're experiencing so many more deaths than in a typical January. So that's the sad state of affairs we're in right now.
Experts say Omicron appears to be more mild in symptoms, but not among the unvaccinated.
About 70% of our hospitalized patients are unvaccinated, and it's closer to 90% that are on ventilators in the ICU. Because there is no vaccine protection, the odds of death are greater here, and this is something we need to prepare for.
All right, Priscilla Thompson joins us now live from a testing site in Times Square. Priscilla, we know testing obviously one key to curbing the spread of Omicron. Another, of course, is masking up, making sure you keep your distance from some people. The CDC is out now with a major new update. I know you have some new reporting.
That's right, Tom. Within the last hour, the CDC saying that people can now choose whether they want to wear an N95 or a KN95 mask, saying that both of those provide excellent protection against the virus. And what they're saying is they're not telling people to choose one or over the other. Instead, that they're saying either mask will work. You really want to go for the one that fits you the best and that you're actually going to wear consistently. And of course, this is a reversal from what we were hearing early on in the pandemic when the agency was discouraging people from using those masks for fear that there wouldn't be enough for frontline workers. But they are now saying that there is no fear of a shortage. Tom?
Priscilla Thompson for us. All right, Priscilla, thank you for that. With testing delays and shortages around the country, the Biden administration is ramping up its efforts to provide at-home tests to Americans. Starting tomorrow, private insurers will be required to pay for up to 8 over-the-counter tests a month. This as the White House launches a new website to ship out 500 million tests directly to U.S. households. CNBC healthcare reporter Bertha Coombs joins us now. Bertha, so many viewers have questions about this. We know the Biden administration is setting up a website, which I mentioned. It's covidtest.gov, but that's going to take 7 to 10 days for the test to arrive at your door. So if someone needs one sooner and you're able to find a test at your local pharmacy, for example, how do you get reimbursed through the insurance company? And are the insurance companies even ready for this? Because it feels like it's all happening pretty fast.
It is happening very fast, Tom, and the key here is whether you can find one. So the administration put out the final rules for this. They've been talking with insurers for several weeks, but they put out the final rule just on Monday, and it starts tomorrow. So insurers have not had a chance to really set it up. They are hoping to be able to work with their pharmacy benefit units to be able to put it through their preferred pharmacies, and that's what the administration has asked them to do. I spoke with the CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Administrator, earlier this week, and she says that's what she's suggesting to insurers to do. But they can't do that at the drop of a dime, and they're not really built for reimbursing you for over-the-counter stuff. They usually need a billing code that comes from a doctor or a therapist. So what you should do now is if you buy a test starting tomorrow, be sure to hold on to that receipt. The rules are you will get 8 tests per person per month. Most of them obviously come in 2 tests in a pack, so that's 4 packs per person, which is up to about $100 in reimbursement, because a lot of these packs cost about $24 a piece. You might be able to get them for less. That's the limit of what they will reimburse you for those. Hold on to that receipt. Try to go to the same pharmacy that you go to for your in-network pharmaceuticals and drugs. That's probably where you're going to get the best price and probably where your insurer, pharmacy benefits folks want you to go and access them if you can.
Bertha, it's great you point out that each packet has 2 tests. I totally forgot about that. I was thinking each person could get 8 of those boxes, but you're right. You need only 4 of those boxes, or you can only get reimbursed for 4, I should say. So we're getting all these things for free, it seems, right? We're getting the vaccines, we're getting the PCR test in some cases if you have insurance, and now we're getting these at-home tests for free as well, and the insurance will cover the ones that we buy. Who's ultimately footing the bill for these tests?
Well, it's not clear whether the administration is going to reimburse the insurers. It doesn't look like that right now. So they will be covering this as part of your premiums, and it's only during the public health emergency, which was just extended for another 90 days. But if we're still doing this into next year, and we continue to have a public health emergency into next year, it could start creeping into your premiums eventually because they'll have to recover those costs. That said, the lab tests cost more than a home test. So if people replace some of these and do some of these home tests rather than going to a lab for a rapid test, that could ultimately even out and actually cost less.
All right, CNBC's Bertha Coombs. Bertha, always great to have you. And coming up in our next half hour, an NBC News investigation into pop-up COVID testing sites with some troubling accusations about their reliability and the warning about guarding your personal information. That's coming from Ann Thompson in a couple of blocks, so stay with us. All right, next we want to show you some newly released body cam footage from the deadly Marshall Fire that destroyed entire neighborhoods in Colorado. You may remember this. This video takes you inside the desperate effort to evacuate residents as the most destructive fire in the state's history raged on. NBC's Emily Aketa has those shocking images.
For last month's historic fire consumed entire neighborhoods in Colorado.
Move now!
Every second mattered.
Everybody head east! Get out of the store now!
This newly released body camera video revealing just how quickly these officers jumped into action.
Let's evacuate now!
Within minutes, rushing these terrified shoppers out of a Costco surrounded by smoke.
Evacuate now!
And directing them away from danger.
East, go!
Offering help amidst the chaos and confusion.
You don't have a car?
No.
Get in.
Door to door.
Sheriff's office! Sheriff's office! Ma'am, you have to evacuate.
Yeah, we are. We're back.
Sheriff's deputies evacuating residents.
Bring whatever's absolutely essential. I don't have
scooping up dogs.
Come here.
Even saving horses.
Come on, guys. Come on.
Tonight, officers talking about those split-second decisions.
For me, it was, I'm terrified, and I was terrified that whole day. This is my job to do. I got to do it. I'm trained for it. Hopefully make it out of there, which we did.
Thank you so much for getting us.
Of course, ma'am. That's what we're here for.
That day, risking their own lives to drive through the fire. Only daylight would reveal the extent of the devastation. More than 1,000 homes lost, but a community grateful to the brave officers who helped so many survive.
Evacuate now!
All right, Emily Aketa joins us now. So, Emily, we know at least one person died tragically in these fires, but the search for survivors or just the search for the missing is not over yet, right?
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, the death toll still could rise. Authorities are zeroing in on one block of just a completely incinerated neighborhood. They say that the weather not only slowing down their search for a missing person, but also their search for the cause of the fire. You think about it, 8 inches of snow blanketed this region immediately after the fire tore through, also covering up possible evidence.
Yeah, when you see that video, you are reminded how bad that fire was. Emily, thank you for that. We want to turn to politics now. Donald Trump preparing to take the stage for his first rally of 2022, 1 year after the inauguration of President Biden. The former president continues to push his Stop the Steal conspiracy theory, Trump now trying to play kingmaker, endorsing almost 60 candidates who stand by his election fraud claims. Hallie Jackson reports.
Former President Donald Trump set to take the stage in Arizona Saturday for his first rally of 2022, sharing the spotlight with controversial fellow supporters of the Stop the Steal conspiracy theory, including Kari Lake, running for governor there, and Secretary of State candidate Mark Finchem.
This election was so shady, so shoddy, so corrupt.
Donald Trump won.
It was not, and he did not. But by supporting Mr. Trump's election lies, both have earned his endorsement. So have 57 other candidates who have questioned the legitimate 2020 results as Mr. Trump flexes his political muscle ahead of the midterms with more than 90 endorsements overall, including 15 for candidates challenging GOP incumbents he doesn't like. Just today, New York's John Katko, one of the few Republicans who voted to impeach then-President Trump, announced he will not run for re-election. Mr. Trump's reaction? Another one bites the dust. Lately, the former president has made headlines for his shift in tone on vaccinations, booed for blasting the shot's doubters.
Both the president and I are vaxxed, and did you get the booster?
Yes.
I got it too. Okay, so...
Don't.
And taking this dig at politicians who now decline to say whether they've been boosted.
Yes, but they don't want to say it because they're gutless. You got to say it. Whether you had it or not, say it. But the fact is that I think the vaccine has saved tens of millions of people throughout the world. I have had absolutely no side effects.
The former president looking to retain his grip on the party as he hints at a 2024 campaign, with one source close to him telling NBC News all signs point to him running.
Hallie Jackson for us tonight. Hallie, thank you for that. We head overseas now as U.S. officials warn that Russia may be preparing for an invasion of Ukraine after a week of high-stakes talks failed to resolve differences between Russia and the West. With more on the tensions, we're joined by our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. So, Andrea, what's the latest we know on the intelligence out there?
Good evening, Tom. In a highly unusual move, the U.S. is declassifying intelligence it says shows Russia has sent operatives into eastern Ukraine to carry out acts of sabotage against Russian-backed forces. The idea is to make it look like a Ukrainian attack to justify a Russian invasion. Russia denies it. But in turn, U.S. officials tell NBC News the U.S. is considering arming Ukrainian insurgents. This as 70 Ukrainian government websites were hacked today but are now back up. Ukraine is linking it to Russian intelligence, but the U.S. says it's too soon to say who was responsible. But it's right out of the Russian playbook. If it turns out to be Russia, it could trigger sanctions from the U.S. and U.S. allies. Tom?
Okay, Andrea, we will stay monitoring that situation. Still ahead tonight, the disturbing police body cam footage. A sergeant appearing to physically attack a fellow officer during an arrest. What happens moments before? Plus, the major ruling against former drug CEO Martin Shkreli. How much he has to pay back after raising the price of a life-saving drug 5,000%. And the dog rescued inside a collapsed home after 6 days. How first responders risked their own lives to get her. Stay with us. Top story just getting started on this Friday night. Back now in Top Story, it started as an arrest, but ended with a sergeant grabbing another officer by the neck. NBC correspondent Zincle Esamwa with the story and the tape.
Tonight, body cam video showing a veteran sergeant allegedly physically assaulting a fellow officer on the job. The police chief calling the behavior disgusting. In the video released by Sunrise Police in Florida, the audio is muted and most faces blurred by the department, citing an internal investigation. The November 19th incident shows a sergeant who police confirmed to be Christopher Police arriving on site as officers place a man in handcuffs into the backseat of a police car. The sergeant is then seen approaching the vehicle and engaging with the suspect. Video shows the sergeant holding what police say is pepper spray. Nearby, an officer whose name has not been released approaches the sergeant from behind in what the police chief says was an effort to de-escalate the encounter, then pulls the sergeant backwards by his belt. The sergeant turns and places his hands at the throat of the officer, then pushes the officer backward until the intervening officer makes contact with a nearby police car before pulling back. According to a statement released by the department, upon learning of the incident, the police chief immediately relieved the sergeant of his supervisory duties, saying his actions, quote, unnecessarily elevated the demeanor of the suspect, adding that he is, quote, very proud of the other officer involved in the incident. Police confirmed that officer is 28 years old, on the Sunrise Force for just over 2.5 years. Police is a 21-year-plus veteran of the force, according to the department.
And certainly in more recent months, post George Floyd, for an example, many departments are now making sure they train their officers to be able to intervene if there's an officer who may be going outside of his or her boundaries.
This incident in Sunrise, Florida, months after the state's governor, Ron DeSantis, signed a police use of force bill, which in part requires the creation of training standards, teaching on-duty officers to intervene when other officers use excessive force and to render necessary medical aid to a detained person following an officer's use of force. Now, states including Arkansas, Colorado, Massachusetts, and Washington have passed laws requiring law enforcement to intervene when another officer is using excessive force, and in at least one state, they can even be held liable for not doing so. While the case of the Florida police sergeant remains under investigation, Alexander says police department and legislative changes could spark meaningful change.
What do you think some of those legislative changes will mean for policing as a whole?
Well, I think what it would mean is that we continue to go into the 21st century. Communities across this country are continually asking for police accountability and transparency. And people deserve to have a good police department and one that which they feel that they can trust.
All right, Zinkley Asamoah joins us now live from here in 30 Rock. So, Zinkley, my question to you is that sergeant that we're seeing in the video attack the other officer, has that sergeant put out any kind of statement, saying anything in his defense? And then also, do we know anything about his background?
Yeah, Tom, so we have put several asks out. We still have not heard from the sergeant, but the police department tells us he did have 2 instances of excessive force from 20 years ago, but those were, quote, unsustained. That said, as I mentioned, he has not responded to our request for comment. And in this specific case, we still don't have the name of that young officer who intervened. Tom?
All right, Zinkley Asamoah, we thank you tonight. When we come back, the deadly backhoe rampage. Have you seen this video? Newly released, showing a suspect ramming construction equipment into a home and later going after police cars. How this ended, plus testing sites shut down. What you need to know before getting a test at one of those pop-up locations. Stay with us. Back now with Top Stories newsfeed, and we begin with the deadly backhoe rampage in New Jersey. Newly released video showing that backhoe crashing into a house. The suspect also ramming a police cruiser, I should say police cruisers and other vehicles. Police shooting and killing the driver after trying to stop him for half an hour. 3 officers sustained minor injuries. The suspect in a deadly Christmas parade attack in Wisconsin has been ordered to stand trial. A Waukesha court commissioner announcing the decision today. Brooks now faces 77 criminal charges, including 6 homicide counts. He's accused of killing 6 people and injuring dozens more when he drove an SUV through that parade in November. A major ruling handed down to the so-called pharma bro, Martin Shkreli, a federal judge banning the former CEO from the pharmaceutical industry for life. He will also have to return more than $64 million in profits from Daraprim, while CEO's company raised the price of a life-saving drug more than 5,000%. He's currently serving a 7-year sentence for unrelated financial crimes. And a dog in Washington was rescued after it was trapped inside of a collapsed home for 6 days. Video shows the moment firefighters in Seattle pulled the lab out of the wreckage. A landslide caused the home to slide off its foundation on January 7th. The 2 homeowners managed to crawl out, rescue workers cutting through walls and flooring to get the dog, despite the risk that that home could further collapse. The animal, luckily, was not injured. All right, next, you've probably seen or maybe even gone to a pop-up COVID testing site, but how much do you really know about the companies behind them? Tonight, there are new warnings and consumer alerts causing concern across several states. NBC's Ann Thompson has more on this, and the company investigators are zeroing in on.
At strip malls, urban storefronts, even trailers, the Center for COVID Control set up more than 300 testing sites in at least 29 states. Tonight, all of them are shut down, and the company is under investigation by the federal agency that oversees Medicare and Medicaid.
We're here doing free COVID testing Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 7. No insurance needed.
There are growing questions about the pop-up site's business practices, spurred by consumer complaints like Kelly Fisher's.
It was a pop-up tent in the parking lot of a mini mart.
She got a test before going on a trip with college friends in September.
I wanted the results in 24 to 48 hours, and I got them a week later. So by the time I received them, they were useless.
Now Fisher wonders why they needed her insurance information and a photo of her driver's license. The Center for COVID Control is an Illinois-based company. Its CEO is 29-year-old Aaliyah Siyaj, whose previous businesses include an axe-throwing lounge and a donut shop. Along with the federal probe, the center is the target of legal action in several states, 2 issuing cease and desist orders, regulators in 2 others tagging sites for operating without a license. Oregon's Department of Justice investigating unfair trade practices.
Are you concerned that this company is running a scam?
I think that's a possibility. We've received a number of complaints that raise some red flags.
Now the center's CEO is apologizing, saying due to our rapid growth and unprecedented recent demand for testing, we haven't been able to meet all our commitments. The company says it will pause all services for the next week for additional staff training. Consumer advocates say if you go to a testing site, be wary of requests for out-of-pocket payment and sensitive information beyond your health insurance. And look for an association with a known organization you trust to make sure the test you take protects your physical and financial health. Ann Thompson, NBC News.
And thank you. Now to top stories global watch and the deadly train derailment in India. Video shows survivors getting pulled out of a mangled train car. 12 cars went off the rails and 3 flipped over. At least 9 people killed and more than 45 others injured. Authorities are now investigating the cause. And a page from a 1984 Spider-Man comic book has set a world record. The single page selling for almost $3.4 million at a Dallas auction, making it the world's most valuable sheet of original comic book artwork. It contains the first depiction of Spider-Man's black suit, which inspired the character we know today as Venom. A copy of Superman's first comic book also sold for more than $3 million. All right, we want to turn to Southeast Asia right now, where the Mekong River is facing some of the lowest levels on record, impacting wildlife and those who rely on the river for survival. Communities in Thailand blame China's hydropower dams upstream. NBC's Keir Simmons is there.
The mighty Mekong River, source of food and water for millions. And tonight, the front line in a David and Goliath confrontation with China.
When the river have problem, the people near the river have problems same.
You don't have the food because you don't have the fish.
No have everything.
In 10 years, the Mekong has changed dramatically. An estimated 40% of fish have disappeared on this stretch of river, according to the Mekong River Commission. Many say the reason is upstream. China has built 11 hydro dams, and Chinese companies are helping build more in neighboring countries. The dams contribute to historic floods and some of the worst droughts in living memory, disrupting the centuries-old ecosystem and damaging fish stock.
To find out just how badly fish stocks have been impacted, we're going to go talk to folks in this fishing village.
It's almost deserted. 18 pontoons, but we see only 5 fishermen. 64-year-old Sinkam Watanam has been fishing since he was 12.
How was the fishing today?
None, he says. It's been like this every 2 to 3 days. John Roberts runs an elephant sanctuary by the Mekong. Small organizations like his, he says, were not consulted by Beijing.
Like someone turned off a tap.
Exactly that. So the days of the long 3-month flood, which would have been part of the ecosystem for millennia, have just disappeared completely.
China says its dams do not negatively impact the lower Mekong and has agreed to share more water data, but is still accused of not giving enough warning when it opens or closes the dams. So a team in Washington, D.C. is trying to help supply information China does not.
The Mekong's dying a death of 1,000 cuts from these dams.
The Stimson Center's Mekong Dam Monitor uses satellite technology to measure China's reservoir levels and inform people in countries downstream.
Whether China will share actual physical data, not data that's observed from afar with satellites, that remains to be seen.
But local people have been pushing back and winning. Campaigner Pianporn Dites fighting a proposal to turn the river into a canal for container ships.
So these are the rocks they would want to demolish.
All this section of the river will be canalized, meaning that all the concrete on the both sides of the river.
The project, from China's Yunnan province, along the border of Myanmar, Thailand and Laos, is part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a trade policy which claims to support neighboring countries. But here, at least, it has backfired. And China has listened. For the second time, the plan is on hold.
You have to stand up and fight it again.
Delegations from Beijing have even visited local activists like Pianporn and Nuat, perhaps a sign of China's government recognizing it must persuade, not just impose. The most important thing, he says, is that China has people too, and we have to make them aware. What they do doesn't just impact me, it impacts the world. It impacts themselves. The battle over this river's future may hold lessons for the world.
Keir Simmons, back from that trip, joins us now from London. So, Keir, this is just more proof of China's influence and stretch all over the world. You know, when you look at that dam, you see what type of a massive project this is. Do they have any more projects like this in the works in that region?
Tom, there are plans for more dams. We mentioned 11 in China. There are reports of 11 more planned or beginning to be built, not just in China, but in other countries. What an irony, Tom, that these dams, these hydro dams, help to reduce climate change because they take China away from using coal, and yet they have such an impact on the environment. But you know, Tom, this isn't just about the environment. This is about democracy. This is about how China does its business, whether it listens. And there, as I mentioned at the end of that report, there may be a lesson for the world about the way China operates, but also about the way China may be being impacted by its own behavior.
Is there any hope that the fish and wildlife that you were pointing out there along this river could bounce back with either better water management or just changes to the way they're watching this?
Yeah, you know, reports of 69 species of fish disappeared, 60 million people relying on food and other benefits from that river. There is hope, and the people that I spoke to, the local activists, have hope that they can turn things around. Having said that, Tom, that's not going to happen if there are more dams. And it's certainly not going to happen if the river is turned into a shipping canal with the sides of that beautiful river concreted so that there's simply not the same river at all. So this really is a push and pull, and how things play out depends on the region, depends on China, and depends on the pressure from those local people. But you've got to say also from countries like the US, pressure on China to shift the way it behaves.
All right, Keir Simmons with another fascinating story. Keir, we thank you for that. Coming up, what happened in Vegas? It's been more than 2 decades since the murder of a rich gambling executive, but authorities have not found his killer. Tonight, never-before-seen footage on Dateline, and Keith Morrison joins Top Story with a preview. That's next. We're back now with the mysterious death of casino owner Ted Binion in 1998. It's a Las Vegas story that has it all: money, drugs, sex, betrayal, and 2 murder trials for his live-in girlfriend and her lover. Tonight, Dateline NBC's Keith Morrison revisits that case that grips Sin City and exposes new information.
Ted Binion was a man of contradictions, a good old boy who liked to hunt, but also collected art, who drank whiskey straight up, but at times smoked heroin, who drove a battered old pickup truck but gave Sandy a shiny new Mercedes, who had tens of millions in the bank, but was widely known to keep piles of cash in his home, not to mention the silver he stashed at the casino, or buried out in the desert like some sort of swashbuckling pirate. And while he was most comfortable in a work shirt and Wranglers, Ted wanted Sandy to dress in a way that men would notice, telling her,
"I want you to be able to go buy beautiful clothes, and beautiful clothes are expensive. I want you to be able to go to dinner when you want so that you have money whenever you want, and you don't have to ask me, because I don't want my woman to work." He had his role and I had mine. And my role was to be the woman of the house and to take care of him.
And look good.
Not really to look good, but I wanted to be attractive for my man.
A man old enough to be her father, but wealthy enough for her to pretend he wasn't. At least, that's how Ted's sister Becky Binion viewed it. Pretend.
And I thought maybe she was just going to be a passing fancy. I thought that it would be something that would just be something that would come into his life and go on, and then there'd be someone else. But I was wrong.
Dateline correspondent Keith Morrison joins us now. Keith, thanks for joining Top Story tonight. You know, this story I know has been a part of your life for more than 20 years. If you could tell our viewers a little bit about one part of the story that they'll see in the Dateline hour, about how this woman, a main character in the story, flagged you down while you were driving in California.
We just happened to see one another. As a woman I had done a story about years and years ago. A remarkable tale, which was just full of all kinds of questions for me and continued to be over the years. And then after she was in touch with me, I started to look into it again. And boy, it's rich and deep, and it's a classic Las Vegas story in a way that maybe most people wouldn't know Las Vegas. So it's intriguing, that's for sure.
No, it is. It almost has this treasure hunt vibe to it, along with the allegations.
Literally.
Literally, along with all the criminal allegations. What was the most pressing question you wanted to know or want to get the answer to?
Well, really, there were lots of pressing questions. the most pressing question, I guess, is what happened to Ted Binion. But behind that, who were the operators in Vegas? Who were they then? Who are they now? This occurred at a kind of a fulcrum in the history of that town, where it went from, it had been known as a kind of a mob-run town for many years. And the FBI got busy trying to get rid of the mob back in the 80s and 90s. And by the time this particular incident occurred, that was happening. So it's a much more corporate town now. But there was a time when people, buried silver out in the desert and strange things happened along the Strip. And this is a story about that time. It's really one of the most engaging stories I've been involved in.
What's one of the biggest challenges as somebody who's sort of become this Jedi master of the Dateline storytelling, doing these stories that sort of go back in time and trying to link the two? What's the biggest challenge when you try to do that?
Well, for one thing, you look at yourself 20-some years younger and you think, holy cow, we're actually going to put this on television compared to that. But it's just a fascinating process, that's all. I enjoy the process of discovery so much and rediscovering things that I missed the first time around. And catching them this time, and then talking to some of the people who were involved then, who have also learned new things. A lot goes on under the covers in a place like Las Vegas.
All right, Keith, we look forward to it tonight. Thanks for joining Top Story. You can catch Dateline's new episode entitled What Happened in Vegas tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern on NBC.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.